To the meeting tonight. Members of the public are welcome to speak on any topic, whether it's on tonight's agenda or any issue that is important to you. Each person that wishes to speak should complete a speaker card over by the door and submit it ahead of time to the city clerk sitting on the end of the dais here. After you have been recognized to speak, please use the microphone at the podium and clearly state your name and address for the record. Please address all your comments to the city council rather than individual members. Direct all questions to this chair. Speakers will be given up to 3 minutes. Excuse me? She'll show up. We've already done the pledge. We've already done our moment of silence. We've already said that we're all here, and I'll just mention again that all council members are still here. So we'll go to item 8A, which is the ordinance number 2024-11, future land use map. Ms. Fisher.
Thank you, Council. Let me bring that up on the presentations. And as we've done before, we're going to present agenda items 8A and B. And for the record, I'm Christy Fisher, the city's planning director. This is the second reading, so it's not the first time City Council has heard it, but I will go through a little bit shortened presentation to remind everybody where this property is and what they're requesting of the city. So the city attorney previously had gone through the quasi-judicial disclosures, and I guess since 2 weeks ago, if you all have any disclosures, if you could let him know.
I don't see any.
Okay. Background, the attorney, Kim Rosanka, is the agent for the property owner, who's Welchwood Enterprises, Inc. The property is shown on this aerial with the red outline, and it's on the east side of the St. John's Heritage Parkway. It's a little bit over 37 acres. It's vacant property right now, and the proposed use is to be mixed use. And then currently in the city, the existing FLU stands for future land use. We'll look at that in a minute, and the zoning currently is single family. So the property history, according to the property records, this property has been owned by Welchwood Enterprises since the late 1980s. There was some original plans for mobile home parks. In 2005, there was a change to potentially be single family. And then Brevard County acquired some of the 110-acre original property for the St. John's Heritage Parkway, and that left 37.67 acres. And most recently, this property was used as a utility staging area. On this slide, we show that on the left-hand side of the screen, again with that red outline, the property has a designation in the future land use map of LD, which is low density residential, and MD-residential, which is medium density. If the designation passes tonight on second reading, then that property would go from those two sort of yellowish colors to a purple for the Parkway interchange. It is consistent, so one of the analysis we do is to look at our comprehensive plan. And again, FLU is the future land use goals, objectives, and policies in that particular element, and it is consistent. Property rights analysis, remember that's an element in the comprehensive plan that requires that every local government try to balance private property rights and community interest. And then going to agenda item 8B, the rezoning request. Again, on the left-hand side of the screen, you had the property as it is now zoned, the R1A and the R2, and on the right side of the screen, you see the designation that they would like to have. Those initials stand for Gateway Interchange. This was a bubble plan that was submitted with the development agreement, and we'll get to that in a minute. But again, to refresh you, that sort of bluish color was the residential area, and sort of that light brown was the commercial area. Rezoning analysis, part of that is to look at the compatibility with surrounding uses and zoning, and so we did do that determination, and it is consistent with the surrounding zoning and uses. I thought it might be helpful to see a bigger map, so I showed this last time also. That blue circle indicates the property and its location sort of on the bigger scheme of things on the west side of I-95. And you have quite a bit of the gateway interchange that's really to the south, but you have some to the north too. Your Planning and Zoning Board, as your advisors on comprehensive plan matters and zoning matters, they made the recommendation on both agenda items to recommend to you all to approve both of these items. So on agenda item 8A, the recommendation is to approve the second reading of ordinance number 2024-11. And then as a separate action, you all would make a motion on agenda item 8B, the rezoning, to approve the second reading of ordinance number 2024-12. And if we could have the city attorney read the title of the ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 2024-11, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan to change the future land use for a 37.67 acre parcel of land generally located west of Interstate 95, north of US 192, on the east side of St. John's Heritage Parkway, and as more fully described herein, from low-density residential and medium-density residential to Parkway interchange, providing an effective date.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so does anybody from the public want to talk on this topic? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Frampus.
Christiana, just a question. Did we work out the terminology on the development agreement?
We did, and I'll go through that in 8C, but
Yeah,
I
I was
now.
just curious. I'll make a motion we approve the second reading of ordinance 2024-11 as written.
Mr. Detmore. Second. Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Frampus, a second from Mr. Detmore on ordinance 2024-11. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Seeing none, passes 7-0. Item 8B, Christie.
Yes, 8B, if you could approve the second reading of ordinance number 2024-12, and if the city attorney could read that title, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 2024-12, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, rezoning a 37.67 acre parcel of land generally located west of Interstate 95, north of US 192 on the east side of St. John's Heritage Parkway, and as more fully described herein, from R1A, single-family residential, and R2, 1-2, and multifamily residential to Gateway interchange, providing an effective date.
Thank you. This is also a public hearing, so does anybody wish to speak on this topic from the audience? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Mr. Frampus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion we approve the second reading of ordinance 2024-12 as written.
Mr. Detmore.
Second.
Ms. Young.
I have a question, please.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question,
Oh,
please.
do we have to vote it? No. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You're up.
If we had a bubble plan before, I mean, I noticed here, and did you say you were going to cover that in C, or we're only on B now?
Yes, I will cover the buffer between the two properties. I was going to cover that in 8.
Okay, because this is the question I had at the first reading, and then we put it on hold, so I didn't ask it. So that was what I was going to ask about the bubble plan. So thank you very much. I'll wait for C then.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, we have a motion from Mr. Frampus, a second from Mr. Detmore on ordinance number 2024-12. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Seeing none, passes 7-0. Item C.
Okay, this is the development agreement that accompanies the two agenda items you just heard. And again, this was also on the May 21st meeting. I believe that was that the right date? I think it was. The background is the same, except that this development agreement does talk a little bit about the mixture of the property, and that's where it's 9.5 acres commercial, 24.44 acres residential, 3.76 acres open space. The Planning and Zoning Board, again, as advisors to City Council, they held their public hearing on May 15th. The particulars from the development agreement, remember, there's also a density and intensity cap where although the count of the dwelling units could be higher than 488 units, They're capping themselves at 488 on 24.44 acres, potentially up to 94,000 square feet of commercial space, and at least 3.7 acres as open space integrated between the residential and commercial. There's some mention about architectural standards, and that's pretty common in the city's development agreements, and then the bubble plan. And so this was another way, again, of looking at the fact that you have, this potential new community, and you've got an existing community called the Dunes that's to the north. And so the yellow line that's on this aerial indicates the north property line, and that was a subject of some discussion about, having a buffer that would be suitable, not just a fence or a wall that's 6 foot tall. And what we ended up doing was making a few changes. This was the applicant proposed the changes, and staff reviewed it. There had been a previous mention of the maximum height of buildings being 65 feet, and so the 65 feet was stricken. Now specific, it's residential buildings, 50 feet, so everyone knows what the total height can be in that particular zoning district. And that's why I said in the second bullet, the commercial buildings can be a little bit taller, but the main thing about the residential is that if they did the apartments, that's the third bullet, and I mentioned this in the staff report, that setback on what's called a side interior would only be 15 feet. Well, now, with the language that's been added into the development agreement, it's going to be at least 50 feet. So there won't be a building closer than 50 feet to that north property line. Some additional items were, the fact that it was to-be owner-occupied units, townhouses or condominiums or something to that effect. But as they identified, and you could certainly ask them a little bit more about their business plan, I don't believe they have a developer yet. So in conclusion, remember we've got the density and intensity limits. The maximum building height of 65 feet is commercial. For the residential, it's only 50 feet. And your Planning and Zoning Board made a few minor changes, mostly to specify a reference to the St. John's Heritage Parkway. It was advertised. We didn't get any feedback as staff on the development agreement or the rezoning or the comprehensive plan amendment. So the Planning and Zoning Board recommended on May 15th for City Council, if you so choose, to approve the Welchwood Development Agreement with a condition that the development coordinate a potential road connection to Columbia Lane. And I'll try to answer any questions you might have. And this has no ordinance with it. It's just the agreement.
And there's nothing quasi, on this?
It is. I'll let the city attorney address that.
Yeah, I mean, you'll still want to disclose any ex parte communications. My assumption for this one is if you didn't have anything on the comp plan or the rezoning, that you probably wouldn't on the DA either. But if somebody brought up the DA specifically and you didn't disclose it earlier, please do so now.
Seeing none, so we'll move on. Mr. Frampus. Oh, let's let the public speak first. I'm sorry. Anybody from the public? This is a public hearing, so anybody from the public want to speak on this, come on up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Kim Rosanka, 1290 US 1, Rockledge, Florida. I'm the applicant for this matter. I did want to clarify, and I hesitate to do this, but we had actually changed the buffer. If you can look at the bubble plan, it's a progression that we would say that we would do more height the higher we went, with a maximum of 50 feet. But the intent right now is to do townhomes, which have a maximum of 35 feet anyway. And if you look at the bubble plan, there's only 2 actual residential lots that would be next to the commercial, and then the residential would be further to the east. But if you look at section 7 of the DA, we had written it a little bit differently than Christie had stated, and I just wanted to make that clear, that it's not a maximum, it's not a 50 feet set.
What is it? What is it?
It's increase. The developer shall increase the building setback along the north property line by an additional 5 feet for every 5 feet over 35 feet. So it's going to be a max, it's going to be 35 feet if it's a 35-foot building, and then we can go up to 50 feet. And this was based on other language in your code, and we had run this by by Christie, and she said it was acceptable, but the way she spoke about it, it was a little
Right.
different than I understood. So
A little different.
I wanted to clarify
So it's
that.
15 feet at what level, and then it increases from there? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
what it is? So is
Well,
it start
yes.
increasing at 35 feet, or is it start increasing at 15 feet? What page are we looking at?
Well, they're looking at 8C-9, page 2, and it's towards the bottom, section 7, buffering. And the applicant is correct.
So
I
if it's
summarized
35
it.
feet tall, it only has to be 15 feet buffer, a 15-foot buffer?
No,
Isn't that what that says? You said it starts at 15 feet, and we don't start increasing it until after we go above 35 feet. Right?
do you mind if I ask the engineer to come up, because you had sent me the math?
Isn't that what I'm reading?
35 feet plus the 15 feet was what I had gotten. And your email said 50 feet, so that's where I got it from.
And the residential property to the north has the exact same height restrictions of 35 feet and the 15-foot side setback.
But they're residential homes, right?
Yes.
I mean,
So
they're
this is
not apartment
residential.
buildings, so
It won't be an apartment, it'll either be a condo or most likely townhomes, right? Single-family ownership.
what's your normal, Christie, what's the normal two-story house run, height-wise?
25 feet, 20 to 25. Yeah.
Did we include any kind of foliage or anything in the buffer zone?
We didn't in here in terms of anything extra other than meeting the landscape. So we said, all landscaping on the common property shall meet City of West Melbourne standards and requirements and shall be designated on the subdivision plat or site plans. And the only thing we talked about was the St. Augustine grass, but no, we didn't say anything more than it's got to meet the code.
Is there any existing trees that you guys are leaving there, or?
Well, and existing native vegetation is left, that's in the agreement as well, to the extent possible. And there's a 6-foot.
Well, that's subjective.
Well, it is, and to be really
You're
frank,
gonna make it all sidewalk, none of it's.
it's a low-level property. If you've been through there, that area is relatively
I
low.
would have disclosed it.
Please also keep in mind that when a site plan for this project does come forward, because it's over the threshold, that this site plan will come to council for approval. So when there is, and there isn't, so but when there is a site plan, this will come back to council and be able to review those buffers that they're proposed in the site plan.
But you have a little less leeway then than you do now, so, I mean, if you make an agreement now, you're gonna, right?
That statement is true, yes. But I also do want to remind that because it's over the threshold, it'll have to come for council approval on the site plan.
I think Andrea said she had a question on that before me anyhow.
She's third down.
Okay,
You done?
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Before we ask any more questions, I want to see if anybody else from the audience wants to speak on this subject. And then I'll let the council ask questions. Seeing none, we'll close that. Someone turn the light out. Ms. Young.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two questions. This property is in AE flood zone, and we know that we've had issues with flooding throughout West Melbourne. So being in AE, being serious risk for flooding, what are you doing to ameliorate?
Ms. Anna Saunders of VSC will have to answer that. And also, too, Mr. Greg Wood with the development, with the owner is here if you have questions for him.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I was focused on trying to find an email that I think, actually, Chrissy,
Your name and address, please.
Anna Saunders with BSC Consultants, 312 South Harbor City Boulevard,
Thank
Melbourne,
you.
Florida. Would you mind asking the question again? I apologize.
Yes, this property is in flood zone AE. In West Melbourne, we've had issues with flooding, having to go in afterward and try to fix something that we should have asked for in the first place. So since this is in AE, what are you doing to ameliorate the flooding?
So nothing right now because there's no development plan in place. However, when a site plan of any nature comes forward, what would happen if we were the engineer, any engineer would have to do this, you'll do your flood storage calculations that are part of your stormwater criteria. The compensating storage calculations are required to be provided not only in your stormwater report, but also through St. John's. And so you'd be required to provide either that compensatory storage and or go and get what our company would go and get a FEMA CLOMAR, so a conditional letter of map revision F, which is based on fill, so it's based on your design plan. And then after that's approved and is vetted through FEMA and the Water Management District, your project's constructed, fill's placed, you then provide an as-built survey that goes along with that back to FEMA, and you apply for what's called a LOMAR F, so it's the letter of map revision based on fill, so it's no longer conditional, so the C disappears, and then you're able to obtain, you don't need the flood insurance anymore because you've been raised out of the flood zone.
All right, thank you. Wow, that was quite an answer.
I wanted to make sure I was very,
You were. It was an excellent answer. Thank you very, very much. My next question, I don't think it's quite where you are, but I'll go to Christy. So when we get to the development agreement, we have other commercial areas in West Melbourne that when we got to that area, we asked for certain landscaping and certain visual amenities to be kept up, and we were not able to enforce them as it went further. In the first few years, it looked very nice, but now it certainly doesn't look like that any longer, and there's really nothing we can do about it. Can we avoid that going further and maybe be a little more specific in the new commercial area for the development agreement?
Yeah, the only other thing I can think of, because there is a provision in the code that we have used sometimes, that states that all commercial development is to keep up their landscaping even after they get their CO. And it's a challenge to really get that to come to the Code Enforcement Board. But I will suggest that on some developments, we're asking also for a maintenance plan so that we see that they have committed, developer X has committed that they know every year, here's their maintenance schedule of what they have to do to keep up the landscaping. So I think that's probably the direction that I would go with this one too, because that gives them a little more incentive to, try to keep it up, because we'll go back to them and say, hey, on date such and such, we approve this maintenance plan. So that means you've got to keep it up. You voluntarily said you were going to approve it.
Thank you. So I just wanted to go on the record as bringing this up so that we have something in the future to go back to. All right, thank you.
All right. And then if we could go back to addressing the height, are you doing the math?
I saw that conversation.
Oh, there was an email.
From him, yes.
Oh, I thought it was from you.
I don't think this would ever be a side interior lot. That's what I'm confused about. So I think it would be a rear setback of 25 feet.
No,
So, no?
rear's always opposite. Issue.
Okay.
So the intent of it, and whether we clarify the language with Christie or not, the intent is to have your standard buffer, and then our standard buffer equates to a 35-foot height limit, maximum height limit on those residential units. Anything over and above the 35 height limit, for every 5 feet we exceed 35 feet, we provide an additional 5 foot of buffer. So if we go to 40 feet, let's just say the buffer was 20, if it's 20 feet at 35, if we go to 40, the buffer is now 25 feet. We go to 40, it's now 30 feet. So it increases 5 feet with every 5 foot of building height. And that was formulated, really, it was, quite honestly, it was stolen from another section in your code with regard to the redevelopment of your New Haven district, adjacent to existing residential, as you're kind of redeveloping those commercial pieces. And in that particular section, there's that same math equation. By memory, I'm going to tell you it's an additional 10 feet for every 10 feet, or every story, I think it is, that you exceed the minimum, or that maximum.
But I mean, according to this, for a maximum of 50 feet setback.
Right.
But we'll never get there if your maximum building height is going to be 50 feet. We're only going to add 15, so the maximum is going to be 30 feet at a maximum, correct?
Well, that's where, I was about to
So
insert.
why don't we say 30 feet and make it right instead of making it look like something else? It's not 50 feet. It could never be 50 feet if we're agreeing to only have maximum height of the buildings to be 50 feet,
Right.
right?
But we didn't know at the time
That was after.
what height might be sought, and we still really don't know.
I'm just saying, maybe.
Yeah, we still really don't know if is it going to be a 35-foot tall building or is it going to be a 50-foot
But our
tall?
maximum, you said, was going to be 50 feet.
And that's from the code.
Correct.
Right.
So if we start increasing at 35 feet and we go to 50 feet, we only can increase it 15 more feet. So it would be a buffer of 30 feet instead of, you got a maximum.
I understand what
just
you're saying.
terminology and-
That's where,
like-
you know, they had a different perspective as to what that north property line was versus I did.
I just like
thought
to
it was a
in
rear.
writing
And what I would suggest, because you're right, I mean, 15-foot is a side interior. I'm not incorrect about that. I'm correct on that. But to give everybody a little more frame of reference, why don't we just match that if they have a 35-foot tall building, then their buffer is 35 feet up to the 50 feet. And then we don't even worry anymore
Fine
about
with
the
that,
15
but
feet.
The buffer is, you said only 15 feet, right? So.
No, that's what it is in the code, but that's the beauty of a development agreement.
I would
is that
vote
you
for it to be
can,
what you're saying,
okay.
because that's not what this says.
Well, this doesn't have 15 feet in it. That's the only difference. So it's just specifying that the setback is going to be at least 35 feet. If the building is 35 feet, up to a maximum of 50 feet. It doesn't say that now, Councilmember Frampus, but we can certainly make it say that.
Right, but that's not what they are agreeing to.
I don't know.
No, the intent was to provide an additional 5-foot buffer for every 5 foot over 35 feet.
I understand what you agreed to, I just,
It's just
that's not,
what written up. Yeah.
so it's different. What you're saying, they're not necessarily agreeing with, and I agree, I would like to see it the way you said it, but,
So why don't we let the developer caucus over there? Is there any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, are you done?
Why don't we give them a minute to discuss that?
Ms. Volz?
I just had a question regarding potential maintenance plan for the landscaping, and could we put that in
Sure.
here now to make sure that it's going to be in there if we can't add anything later?
Right. This would be the time to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like
They
to
have a
see that.
section about landscaping. I think that's 2D. So that would be the appropriate location in my mind unless the city attorney feels differently. But if you go to the top of page 8C9 and go to D, that's where they talk about some landscaping on the common property, and by and large, most of the property is going to be common, unless they do townhouse lots, but that would be where I would think we could put in a sentence that the developer agrees to submit, you know, a landscape maintenance plan.
when you talk about the common area, Christie, is this governed under it's going to be owner-occupied properties. Is there some sort of HOA or some kind of thing going on here? And whatever rules we set on the developer now is going to transfer over to the homeowners. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it is going to be an HOA? The common
Well, they're going to
property?
have to. I mean, if
Well,
it
I don't
ends
know
up
if
being a
the-
condominium association, you have a condominium association. If it ends up being townhouse lots, then you will have a homeowners association. So either way,
Wonder
there's going to be an
being the Parkway
association.
Intersection, and the way it's set up, I didn't know if the commercial would be handling the common property around the development. I just didn't know how.
Yes.
Well-
They're going to have to, because by the time they put in all their facilities, I doubt that each property in the commercial section is going to have its own stormwater pond. What they'll probably try to do is maximize the use of individual lots.
The exterior around the residential area too. I didn't know who was going to be responsible for taking care of that.
Yeah, you may have two different HOAs. You might have a property owner association for the commercial, and we have that at Heritage Point, at Minton, and Minton and Heritage Oaks, and then you've got Heritage Point, the single-family subdivision, and they also have an HOA. So that's not uncommon.
Yeah, I think what we'll want to do in that sentence is clarify that there will be two HOAs, that one they won't be beholden to the other, right? So if there's a commercial HOA group that's going to maintain the commercial side, you know, we'll want that language in there for them, and then we'll want language in there for the residential side.
I was just pointing out that if we set these standards for the developer,
They're going to carry, yep.
the homeowners not, so if we're going to enforce it down the road later on, we're going to be pushing up on the homeowners to do it, not the developers or, you know, the property owners.
Yeah, but if you think about us living in an HOA, we have to keep up our own properties, so, yeah.
That's why I think we should keep the two separate, so that one, you know, the residential HOA is not having to fight with the commercial or vice versa.
Ms. Fultz, were you done a while ago? Okay, thank you. Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I don't believe that this item is ready for us to vote on because of the back and forth. So I'm going to make a motion that we table this to the next meeting. I realize it's going to be, they're going to have to advertise, but I don't feel comfortable voting on this, on the back and forth, and they're over there working on the maps. And Christie, there's been a some issue, misunderstanding. So I make a motion that we table this until the next meeting, and then we take it up then.
Can I make a comment about that? If you do elect to table this, you will probably want to reconsider the earlier votes on the future land use and the zoning, because I don't think there was ever in the motion that the future land use and zoning would be conditional upon the approval of the development agreement.
We have to just bring those back right now?
I would suggest that you do. Yes, I would suggest that you reconsider them if you're not going to approve the development agreement.
Before you move forward, just real quick, is this something they can resolve? If we move on and bring this back at the end of the meeting, will they be able to resolve this, or are you going to need more time, Christie?
No, I think we should. It was the rezoning that had the condition that the development agreement be approved. So it wasn't a small scale, it's just on the rezoning, but.
So that was part of the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
So what does that mean?
Well, so it means that when you pass a future land use on a second reading, since this is a small-scale plan, it doesn't need to go up to Tallahassee. There is a 30-day window where somebody can challenge the future land use administratively. Once that 30-day window passes, then the future land use would be updated. If you don't have the zoning, though, because there's no development agreement in place, then the future land use will be updated without having the proper zoning.
Okay, so if we push this off to the next meeting, are we good, or no?
Yeah, as long as there was in the motion that it had to include the development agreement, I don't think we need
to re-advertise as well, or just?
No, you can set a date certain. The law was updated last session to allow.
The motions to, unless you want to.
I'd like to hear.
Okay.
Hey, come on up.
I apologize for the confusion and the lack of preparation on my behalf. So to just clarify, the way the calculation came about is we utilized the 25-foot rear yard setback and then added the 5 additional feet for each foot over every 5-foot increment over 35 feet. That actually calculates out to 45 feet. And just being generous, we rounded up to 50 as a maximum buffer. The side set, but the rear setback is 25 feet.
They're thinking of that as being a rear lot line instead of a side lot line. So yes,
the
there's
side-
a difference between what they think and what planning department.
So we're happy to call it a rear setback and do the 25 feet. What I would offer for consideration is, in the residential component, we've got residential next to residential. In that circumstance, you generally don't have a requirement for a 6-foot fence. That is a requirement in this code, and we've agreed to that in the Section 7. So the 25-foot minimum width buffer with the fence, we're happy to engage with, a maintenance plan of some sort through the HOA to make sure that that area is, managed appropriately. The fence would be on the property line side, so it wouldn't be, where someone else has to look at and maintain that vegetation. And then add in addition to the 5 foot of extra buffer for every incremental 5 feet of additional building height over 35 feet.
I think, Mayor, my motion stands for them to bring this back when they actually bring it back in writing to us.
I don't know what your question is. So
But my motion is to table this to the next meeting until they can bring this all back in writing the way it's supposed to be so we can understand it, so.
okay, so do we just ask the council? I'm ready to go forward now.
You need a second.
You have a second? Is there a second to his motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so we'll do a vote.
Mr. Mayor, can I, before you vote, I just want to clarify, hopefully with the city clerk, if she has a record of it, that that was part of the motion for the rezoning, because the recommendation in the staff report doesn't say anything about the development agreement. And so I just want to make sure that was part of the rezoning before you vote to table this, because if you approve the rezoning without the development agreement, then they'll just have the straight zoning without the restrictions of the development agreement. So I don't know if there's a way to confirm that that was part of the motion, but again, I'm looking at the staff report and it doesn't say anything about the development agreement in there.
Hold on one moment.
Yeah, what I was referring to, John, was page 8B-7. And if you look at recommendation, the Planning and Zoning Board recommends council approve the second reading of ordinance number 2024-12, rezoning the property from R1A and R2 to Gateway Interchange with the conditions that the small-scale comp plan, map amendment, and development agreement is approved.
Okay, so the wording on, the recommendation on 8B-1 is different, and I'm not sure which one got read into the record by whoever made the motion. So I was just asking if we can verify that before we move forward, because I think that is,
He said as written.
okay.
And so it's written on the agenda,
Well,
and it's also written on the presentation. So it's a matter of how you determine the term as written.
Well, as written would be the document itself, not the agenda.
the motion that's contained in the agenda item, though, the document itself is the ordinance, but that doesn't have the language for the motion. So, I mean, my concern at the moment is we have two different motions as written, one in the first page of the agenda item and one at the end, and I'm not sure which one was approved by the council, and I don't know if anyone else is sure either.
Mayor, my concern, if we're moving forward, I don't want to rush this to where we're,
I agree with you.
and this concern.
I want to get guidance from the attorney of what we should do right now.
My recommendation is that we,
Back up.
without certainty that the motion contained a reference to the development agreement, and I'm not sure that we have certainty because it said as written, and we have two different recommendations, one on page 1 of the agenda item and one on page 7, and I'm not sure which one was approved since they don't match. And so I think it's prudent to make sure that we go back to the underlying motion in item 8B, make sure that it's the motion that includes the reference to the development agreement before we table the development agreement, because you want the two to travel together. You don't want the rezoning to be approved.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we ask Mr.
Or
Frampus?
do we have to, since it's
Well,
voted on, do we
in your
have to
mind?
redo it?
Yeah, we're going to have to, somebody's going to have a motion to reconsider item 8B, amend the motion, a second vote, and then we can come back to this.
B or A as well?
A doesn't need to be amended because as long as B contains the development agreement language, we're fine.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to bring up the 8B.
Do we have a second for that? Do we need a second?
I think Mr. Frampus is making a motion to reconsider. Okay.
I'll withdraw back, and then we'll go back to 8A, or B.
8B.
So somebody needs to make a motion to reconsider.
We're making a motion to
Make a motion
reconsider.
to reconsider 8B.
I'll second.
And all right, so we have a motion from Mr. Frampus to reconsider 8B. We have a second from Mr. Dedmore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it, 6-1.
Okay, so now I think it would be a good idea for somebody to make a motion and just read it verbatim from the second one that has the wording for the development agreement, just so we have everything set on the record and there's no dispute about what the motion included.
So back to 8B, right? We're redoing it.
Yes,
Mr.
8B-7.
Who's going to read it?
8B, what page?
-7.
-7. for the recommendation, right?
Yes.
I'll make a motion. We approve the second reading ordinance number 2024-12, rezoning the property of R1A, single-family residential, and R2-1-2 multifamily dwelling to Gateway intersection with the conditions that the small-scale comprehensive plan map amendment and development agreement is approved.
Okay, I need Mr. Ditmore. So we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Frampus, a second from Mr. Ditmore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-1 with Ms. Volz voting nay on the last two motions, actually.
Okay, so now,
Now we're back to item C.
Christie, is there a reason it was written differently from the front to
No,
the back?
That
or
was
is
an
that
error.
an
I
error?
apologize.
So item C, I need a motion on that now.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to table this item to the next meeting so that they may have an opportunity to bring this back written correctly.
yeah, so that would be to a date certain of June 18th, 2024.
Right.
And making it to a date certain will ensure that we don't have to re-advertise it, renotice it.
Right.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Frampus. So we have a, go ahead.
For the attorney, when you say date certain, that means we're going to certainly vote. Doesn't mean it's going to go one way or
No, it means that that is the date that we will rehear it. It wouldn't prevent you from kicking it down to another date certain if we were required to do so.
Thank you.
Ms. Young.
It's a legality to make sure that we don't have to renotice, re-advertise.
No, I don't have a question on this. I have questions if we were going forward, so I can't ask questions if we're going to table this. All right, I have to, all questions stop. No, once there's a motion to table, it stops. Okay.
All right, Mr. Frampus, your light's on. All right, so we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Ditmore. Is it from Mr. Ditmore? And a second from Mr. Frampus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Passes 7-0. Moving to item D, which has two ordinances. Ms. Fisher?
Okay, agenda item 8D is the revisions to the zoning districts regarding mixed-use developments. And again, this is a second hearing. In 2023, City Council approved the ordinance that I call it zoning in progress. It's a legal term. Until June 19th for staff to prepare mixed-use development codes without receiving Live Local Act applications. So it's essentially a temporary moratorium. And currently, mixed-use development is addressed in specific zoning districts in the city, but not in general if the state of Florida allows the mixed use in commercial and industrial zoning districts, which it does. So the Planning and Zoning Board conducted its public hearing on May 15th, and they recommended approval with a few minor changes. These were the four items that sort of summarize what's in those two ordinances. And again, we went through some of this visually. You know, mixed use can either be what we call horizontal mixed use, so sort of across the street from each other, residential and the non-residential, or on the right side of the screen, you'll see the vertically integrated mix of apartments, retail offices, et cetera, and that's what a lot of people think of when they think of mixed use. In general, the mixed use will have 3 or more uses. They have a master development plan, a master property owners association, access to the public, enhanced buildings, and layout of the design. In the city, the first thing we needed to do was give a definition in our definition chapter about what mixed use would be, and we specified that it would be 3 or more uses, and that it would be a compact integrated urban form whereby uses are placed either above each other or within walking distance. This was a slide where I showed that we had a proposal once upon a time where we had some development that had contemplated having a mix of uses vertically near Wickham Road, and then behind it would be some residential townhouse lots. The general mixed use standards that we've included in the rewrite is a residential maximum, excuse me, of 65% of land area, 65% of total square footage, commercial minimum of 25% of land area, recreation open space, minimum of 10% of land area. And these are some of the other types of uses that could be in the mixed use. And your Planning and Zoning Board, as I mentioned, they did consider this agenda item, and their recommendation for City Council was to approve the second reading of ordinances number 2024-02 and 2024-03. And if the city attorney could read the title, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 2024-02, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending Chapter 63 definitions of the Code of Ordinances by adding mixed-use definition and removing references to the previous regional mixed-use zoning district, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so anybody from the public want to talk on this topic? Seeing none, we close the public hearing. Ms. Foltz.
Yes, I just want to make it known what this says. And it says the state's new Live Local Act requires that the city administratively approve affordable apartment applications for qualifying developments without public hearing or city council approval. Don't like that, but I want to make sure that the residents know that we're not trying to pull something over. The state has tied our hands on this.
That's it?
That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's make a motion to approve the second reading of ordinance 2024-02 and 2024-03 regarding mixed-use zoning.
Are
Can I
we
do
voting
both?
these separate?
One at a
One?
time.
Okay, I'll do one. All right, we'll do 2024-02 and do the second one afterwards.
Mr. Frampus. Seeing no further lights, we have a motion on the floor for ordinance 2024-02 from Mr. Ditmore, a second from Mr. Frampus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, passes 7-0. Moving on to item 2024-03, Mr. Ditmore.
Make a motion to approve that ordinance 2024-03 as written.
Wait.
You can go ahead and get a second, and then I'll read it.
The title already.
I read the title for 2024-02.
Go ahead. Thank you, sir.
But you can go ahead and get your second, and I'll read it after.
Frampus. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 2024-03, an ordinance striking through Chapter 99 RMU Regional Mixed-Use District to the Land Development Regulations, also known as Subpart B of the Code of Ordinances of West Melbourne, Florida, and replacing it with mixed-use requirements, relocating the IB, Gateway I, C, NH, CW, and the mixed-use overlay districts from Chapter 98 to Chapter 99, providing for severability and interpretation, providing for the repeal of ordinances and resolutions in conflict herewith, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion from Mr. Ditmore, a second from Mr. Frampus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, passes 7-0. Moving to item E, ordinance number 2024-13. Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I presented last meeting, this is another ordinance that I've drafted because I perceived a problem with the Code of Ordinances, that we didn't have an ordinance for the purchase of real estate. Because we don't have an ordinance, we default to the state's rules. The state rules, though, explicitly allow us to have our own ordinance that would mean that we wouldn't have to comply with the state law, and that we would only comply with state law if we wanted to take advantage of the public record exemption for appraisals. So as long as we don't need to take advantage of that provision in state law, we can use this ordinance instead, which will simplify purchases of land for the city and provides different criteria depending on how much the purchase is for, as far as what staff has to do to prepare it for purchase, and the criteria are basically under $25,000, which is the city manager's spending authority, that he wouldn't need to bring it to City Council for approval as long as it was a budgeted item. $25,000 to $250,000 would come to City Council for approval with evidence evaluation and staff analysis, but no appraisal, and greater than $250,000 would require an appraisal. And this would, again, allow us to bypass the statutory requirement for a 30-day notice prior to approval by City Council. The public will still be on notice because it will show up as an agenda item, as all agenda items do. However, it wouldn't require the advertisement 30 days prior, which is an onerous requirement for a lot of what we're trying to do that basically just adds expense and time for no real value for the city. So I recommend you approve ordinance number 2024-13. And if I may read it, Mr. Mayor, this is ordinance number 2024-13, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Florida, creating Chapter 2, Article 1, Section 2-12, providing procedures for real estate acquisitions by the city, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for codification and scrivener's errors, and providing an effective date. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this topic? Seeing none, we close the public hearing. Mr. Detmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion to approve ordinance number 2024-13 as presented by the city attorney.
Second.
Ms. Volz, second. Thank you. So, ordinance number 2024-13, we have a motion from Mr. Detmore, a second from Ms. Volz. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Seeing none, passes 7-0. Now we're moving to item 9, which is the public forum. Do we have any speaker cards? Anybody from the public want to speak on any topic that's of interest to you? We'll give you 3 minutes. Seeing none, close the public hearing or public forum. Move to the consent agenda. I'm going to recommend that we pull item C, so I'd like to vote items A and B. So if I could get a motion for consent agenda items A and B. Mr. Ditmore.
So moved.
Miss Adams.
Second.
So we have a motion on the floor to pass items A and B from Mr. Ditmore, a second from Miss Adams. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes 7-0. So now item C, I think there was some discussion prior to the meeting. So let's, Mr. Frampus.
So we talked a little bit last time about Pledge of Allegiance and doing it for the formal meeting and not the workshops and any post or pre-meetings. However, this meeting, we kind of rolled it all into one meeting and it didn't get done for the formal meeting. And so I wanted to maybe try to clarify that in our order of how we do things. So how would you like to handle that, Mr. City Manager?
I think we can move the line for Pledge Allegiance. I think the intent was always that the Pledge Allegiance would be for the council meeting. We tried something new tonight based on the comments from the last couple of meetings. Instead of having 2 separate meetings, we just made them one meeting and had the budget workshop first. And so
How was the meeting advertised for the general meeting? Was it because technically that would make the general meeting start at 5 o'clock then, right?
Yeah, so it was advertised with both agendas so that people could see that 5 o'clock was the budget worksheet and that 6 o'clock was.
And I'm perfectly fine with that, but if we're going to do that, I believe we should be taping the whole thing and not start the tape at 6 o'clock.
And that's fine. And I think
Archiving, I think we need to have the full meeting.
I think what the intent was that we do the Pledge Allegiance, but the way the agenda's laid out, it didn't
I'm
translate.
okay with it if we do it all under one meeting.
Right,
I agree with that.
one pledge.
But do it in the beginning and tape it from the beginning, so.
So we have agreement on that?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I mean.
All right, so.
Can you state what that exactly meant?
So we traditionally have not taped the workshops.
Right.
But because we do these series of what's ultimately about 9 budget workshops, in order to tie the 2 agendas together, we'll just record the budget workshops.
Yes, but
That way we get the pledge on.
there's always a break in between.
Yeah, we always traditionally take a 5-minute recess
Right, or
in between.
10 or whatever, however long it turns out to be. But I think at our regular city council meeting, we should start with the pledge rather than start at the beginning of nothing.
So if it's combined, like we did tonight, it would start at the beginning of the meeting, which is at 5 o'clock. If it's 2 separate meetings, yes, it would be under the regular meeting, we would do the pledge and not under the workshop. We've done it both ways before, where we've run meetings together or we've run them separately, so either way works for me.
I guess it depends on how long that meeting at 5 o'clock is. If it takes 30 minutes and we get a 30-minute break and there's nothing.
That's up to the mayor to postpone it to,
Yeah.
or to, what I table it until, or I mean,
Yeah.
what do you call it? Reconvene at 6 o'clock or something.
To me, it doesn't matter which way, we just have to pick a way and do it.
My suggestion would be to start the pledge during the normal council meeting, and the only reason I suggest that, and again, it's a suggestion, this is the council's policy for rules. The only reason I suggest starting the pledge at the start of the normal council meeting is traditionally when we get a crowd, I think it's appropriate to do the pledge when the crowd is here.
Wouldn't it be easier just to call it 2 separate meetings then, do an agenda for the workshop, and then have your regular meeting start at 6 o'clock all the time?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to comment is I agree with what he said is I would be fine with not doing the pledge for the workshop, not doing the moment of silence for the workshop. At the formal meeting, the council meeting, I'd want to do the pledge, want to do the moment of silence, and put all that on video, and then you don't have to tape the workshop. We never have, or often.
We can go back to having them separate if
Yes,
that's.
and only do the pledge, unlike tonight, during the normal meeting, and only do the moment of silence during the regular meeting, not twice. We were just trying to get away from doing it twice. Right.
And we're just working through this. We thought the direction last time was to have one meeting, and so we have no problem.
All right.
It's no problem at all. And just to be clear, I think what everybody is kind of nodding their head at is budget. Let's use next council meeting as an example. We'll have another 5 o'clock budget. That'll be just a workshop meeting from 5 to 6. No pledge, no moment of silence. We'll just start the meeting and get into the business. And then whether it ends at 5:30 or 6:05, we'll take our 5-minute recess, reconvene, and then we'll hold the council meeting at which there'll be a pledge and a moment of silence.
Perfect.
Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to clarify that we're not going to be recording the workshops. And the reason I support that is we have in the past gone off-site to do workshops, and that would create a logistical nightmare to try to do that. So I'm in the spirit of being able to continue to do those off-site workshops when we do need to.
Thank you.
We don't have to worry to do that.
Ms. Young.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to beat this to death, but I'm fine with all of this. I don't care if we do it in the beginning or we do it at the end. Just as you said, we just need to pick one. But I saw tonight as 2 separate meetings because when we finished the budget meeting, the gavelled, and the meeting was adjourned, and then we reconvened. So if we're going to do that, to me, that's 2 meetings. If we just blend it all together and we stop at the end of one and we start the next section, and it's still the same meeting, and we do the pledge, then that's still fine, which I kind of think is what we're saying here. I think we're splitting hairs over what we're going to call it.
Right. So, anything else?
No.
Thank you. So, we don't have a motion on the floor yet for this, but my understanding is that we will have a workshop, not record it, and it can end anytime. Then at 6 o'clock p.m., we will have our city council meeting. We will do the pledge. We will do the moment of silence, and everything is recorded as normal. So we need a motion to approve item 10C with the changes that we just spoke of. Mr. Ditmore. So moved. Ms. Young.
Second.
Seeing no further lights, we have a motion on the floor for item 10C on the consent agenda with changes that we've discussed from Mr. Ditmore, a second from Ms. Young. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, we pass this 7-0. Thank you. Now we're moving to the action agenda. Item 11, City Charter A. Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This agenda item is agenda item 11A, and it is a result of the workshop that we had several months ago where the City Council had directed staff to put together a amendment to the charter along with an ordinance that would authorize the supervisor of elections to put it on the ballot to go to the voters for a referendum on the November 2024 general election. And so we've created ordinance number 2024-14. The ordinance itself is pretty benign. The real meat of the ordinance is the attachment, which is the amendment to the charter. However, the ordinance does carry the ballot question, which is something that if we move forward to second reading after tonight's meeting, I will run this past the supervisor of elections for their approval, and the wording of this might change slightly depending on what the supervisor of elections directs me to do. And most of the discussion, though, I expect will be about Exhibit A, which is the red line for the current charter to the new language. What I've done here is amended Article 3, Section 6, which is terms of office. If you're looking on page 11A7, that's where it begins, and we've gone from a single paragraph to A, B, and C format because of some of the things we added. The first is A, that deals with the new council being certified, or election being certified at the next council meeting. That's current language, that doesn't change. B, we've struck some of the outdated language that has November 2020 or 2012 and November 2011. Those were originally put in the charter in order to move from 3-year terms to 4, I believe. And instead of that, we'll have just more generic wording that says presidential election years and gubernatorial election years. So seats 1 through 3 will be coincident with presidential election. 4 through 6 will be gubernatorial elections. And then Section C is the term limit itself, which you approved. And basically what we've done is, it says now, no council member who's completing 3 consecutive full elective terms shall be eligible for election or appointment to the city council, and no mayor who has completed 3 consecutive full election terms shall be eligible for election or appointment to the office of mayor. With the conditions that follow in 1, 2, and 3, which basically establishes the 2 years must elapse for council is part 1, 2 years must elapse for mayor is part 2, and then 3 is the clarification that for the purpose of the term limits, the offices of mayor and city council are distinct, and you can go from one to the other without a gap. So if you have any comments or questions, we can certainly discuss that. The staff recommendation is to approve ordinance number 2024-14, and I will need to read that by title. And this is ordinance number 2024-14, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Florida, proposing amendments to the city charter imposing term limits on the mayor and members of the city council, provided that the proposed charter amendment be submitted to the electors for referendum at the general election to be held Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, providing for the manner in which such election shall be conducted, providing for requisite ballot language, providing for notice and availability of the copies of the proposed amendments, providing for inclusion in the charter and effective date, and providing for severability.
Thank you. Mr. Frampus.
I have a question. It talks about the mayor's position, and this, I'm sorry, it's a little off topic, but the way this reads is, the mayor be held during the general election in the presidential election years. It was always my understanding that if the mayor went out of office prior to the next election, they would go back up for re-election the following election cycle. Wouldn't that change it from a presidential election year, or would it just go up for 2 years at that point? I thought it would be a 4-year term, which would go off cycle from the presidential. I always thought it went back up for re-election for a 4-year term, but is that just goes up for a 2-year term at that point?
So the old language, I need to pull up the old language out of the charter real quick so I don't misstate anything here. So give me just.
Is it similar to a council seat that only goes up for 2 years, like when John resigns to run, his will only go for 2 years? I thought the mayor just reset kind of thing. I'm guessing, just looking for clarity.
So the current language in the charter is that council seats numbered 1, 2, and 3 shall be filled in a general election for a term, starting in November 12 for a term of 4 years. 4, 5, and 6 shall be filled in a general election for 2011. Again, this is the current charter, and shall remain in office for 3 years. And the office of mayor shall be filled in general election to be held in November 2013 for a 3-year term, beginning with the election in November. That's what it says in the current charter. Beginning with the election to be held in November 2024, and each even-numbered year thereafter, council members and the mayor shall be elected to the office for a term of 4 years or until their successors are elected and qualified. So there's nothing in the current charter language that suggests that they would go to the next election. However, it's possible with the changes that were made.
You might want to check for a typo there, because it's been 4 years for multiple terms now.
Well, because it says once November 2014 hit, and each even-numbered year thereafter, council members and the mayor shall be elected to office for a term of 4 years.
So yeah, it was changed.
You'd be having special.
Or until their successors are elected or qualified.
So you'd be just re-elected for 2-year term if it falls before, yeah, okay. Okay, so I'll make a motion that we approve the first reading of ordinance 2024-14 as written.
Deputy Mayor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll second with a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a note that I know Mr. Carey has worked through multiple iterations of this wording to try to capture everything that council discussed in our multiple workshops on this. So I just wanted to thank you for your efforts on it. I know it was a tough conversation getting here, but I think it's exciting to bring this to the voters. And I mean, my personal opinion is I think they should pass it, but that's just one person's opinion. Ultimately, we're going to see what they say, but I think our staff has done a good job, wrangling the different opinions and trying to get the wording done. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Certainly.
Mr. Detmore. Ms. Volz.
I think, personally, I'm not going to be, I don't have anything to do with term limits because I am not going to be here for 12 or 14 years. I'd be 100 years old or whatever. But I think that, Mr. Mayor, you've been here 16 years,
Yes?
and it would prevent somebody like you from serving as long as you have, and you've done a great job. And so I'm just against the term limits for local people, and I'm just going to vote no on it. That was just my opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Frampus.
In the past, when we did charter revisions, I know there's a word limit for the ballot. The last time we did a charter amendment, we had a exclamation on the website, a longer, drawn-out version of why we did what we did, and is that something that you can get up on the website prior to as well?
Yeah, certainly. as you probably know, any explanation has to be factual and can't be seen as being encouraging to vote for or against.
Correct.
But there will be a factual explanation. But as you correctly noted, the referendum question on the ballot is limited by statute to 75 words, and you need to keep it as concise as possible while still giving as much information to the voters as possible to allow them to make the decision.
You know, what we have is relatively a lot less words than that, but I think people could have questions or something maybe.
Yeah, we'll have the information on the website, including the actual language that's here with the strike-through so that they can see what's actually being done in detail.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you turned your light out? You're done? All right, thank you. We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Frampus, a second from Deputy Mayor Adams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Nay. So we have, it passes 5-2 with Bentley and Volz voting nay. So we'll move on to management reports.
Whoa, one more item, sir.
Really? Come on, say it ain't so. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Rhodey, well, that is under management reports.
Oh, I'm sorry, one more agenda item, though. Sorry, one more agenda item.
Yeah, under item 12A, right?
So,
Mr. Rhodey, item 12A is yours.
my apologies, Mayor, my
All right,
apologies.
we're good.
So, following the last council meeting, discussion at the dais during the meeting in regards to naming, whether it be facilities, roads, other items here in the city of West Melbourne. And so our intent was to put together a policy in regards to that. And lo and behold, back in 2011, the city council adopted a policy for naming. And so we had kind of a framework to go off of. Now what both the city attorney and I agree on is we didn't know about this policy because it was not codified and it wasn't in our city code. And so one of the things that we would like to do once we get this policy kind of a workshop tonight, once we get this policy in agreement from the council, would be to then move this forward at the next council meeting and actually codify this into the city code, or I'm sorry, formalize this better as opposed to just having this policy that the council had adopted back in June 7th of 2011. And so again, the gist of this comes out of the naming, the process of naming or renaming both streets or facilities. And there was quite a discussion, and again, kind of sparked by the concept of, we're going to have a new council chambers, and on our wall, for all of you watching online, I'm pointing to the wall at the council chambers where this particular room is named after an individual. And so the concept of, well, when we build a new council chambers, does that name carry over? Does a new name get implemented? How would that name get implemented? And so both the council in the past has dealt with namings of facilities and rooms, as well as renaming of streets. Now, the process of naming streets has a process. Developer is building a subdivision. They propose roads. We double check that with city staff through the 911 system, get county approval to make sure it's not duplicating a name or confusing in any way. And then ultimately that comes to the council to make sure that the council is comfortable with that name so that the name is not offensive or too complicated. We wouldn't want Fell Road next to Felt Road. Those kinds of things are items that we try to prevent for simplicity. And so that process has a pretty good, new roads have a pretty good process that I don't think was really under question during this discussion, but certainly this council has gone through some issues in the past with renaming roads and how that was, and there was some confusion. There was a large crowd at a council meeting when there was a road that was being proposed to be renamed, and there was some frustration. And so out of that frustration, this policy came about so that there would be a clear process of how you rename a road, and that there would be plenty of notice given to the public, so that if I lived on Fell Road and we were going to change it to Smith Road, that I wouldn't hear about it a month after it happened, that I would be able to come to a meeting and say, I really like Fell Road, I like living on Fell Road, please don't change it. So that is encompassed in that. And then we touch on the renaming of facilities or improvements, and we outline a section for that. And then there's one minor item that I requested that we put in here, and that's under procedures. Under E and F, one item that comes to the city on a very infrequent basis, but maybe once or twice a year, is somebody will reach out and want to donate and pay for either a tree at the park or a bench or a picnic table. And we don't really have a set process for that. How we've been handling that in the past is we work with that person as to what they want to donate. Let's say it's a tree. We work with planning and parks to pick out the right tree. We get a cost for the tree. We get a cost for the placard that might go at the base of the tree or around a branch that wouldn't damage the tree. And we come up with a cost for that, and then we forward that cost to them, and we tell them it's going to be $273 if you want to do that, and if they want to move forward with it, then we do that process. Again, that comes up once or twice a year. We are asking that E and F get adopted, which would allow the city manager to be able to continue that without having to do any kind of public notice or have it come to the council for approval. Again, it doesn't have a big impact on our park. You know, whether there's a tree named after Bill Smith or a park bench with Bill Smith's name on it, doesn't have a huge impact on the park itself, not like the naming of the park would have a big impact on the park. And so that's one provision that we've asked to include. In that, we've also added in for the renaming of streets and that the person be deceased. We did not have that section in the renaming or naming of city facilities, and I think that would be an appropriate item to consider. In my past communities, we have named facilities after people in the community, and things have come to light in those people in community, and that's not just a hypothetical. I've lived through that. In one of my communities, we did have to rename the library due to the name that was on the building. And so one way to mitigate that would be to only name things after people who are deceased. But again, that's up for the council to decide. And at any point in time, I do want to point out, whether it's a renaming of a road or a facility or a room, you know, 4 members of this council can take action. And so if 4 members of the council want to rename a road, 4 members can rename a road. That doesn't matter what the policy is, but the policy is meant to be the framework to start that process in order to make it run smooth and get to get to the body.
But an ordinance would keep 4 members from being able to change anything that's in an ordinance.
We would just have to change the ordinance.
Have to change the ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, you can always change an ordinance for a majority rule, so
Yeah.
it just takes an extra meeting to do it.
Right.
Because you have to have 2 readings.
Was a posthumously for roads in the past, or that never was included for anything?
No, that was not. It was not in there for in the old policy.
Okay.
Mr. Frampus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple things. I think having these policies, did you say we're going to change it to an ordinance, or?
Our desire, you know, John and City Attorney Carey and I had a chance to discuss this, and we think codifying this in a way is best because of our situation, right? This came up.
Is that a yes or no?
Yeah, that's a yes. This came up and we started formulating this concept and then learned that there was a policy.
I want to make sure that that's what you meant. We're making this into an ordinance. Okay, so like we do with other ordinance, I think it needs to be more black and white. I'd like to suggest that we, on page 12A-4, that we strike out shall be considered. I think it should be those factors should be relevant to A through G should be what we want in the policy. It makes sense. As long as everybody agrees to A through G, then that's what it should be. I mean, if it makes it very subjective as an ordinance to say, oh, well, we can consider it, and then none of it ever happens. So I'd rather just make it black and white. It's just easier to follow, and it's easier for the city manager to enforce. I would also, when I brought this to you, Mr. Rohde, I wanted it to apply to we were talking about street naming and that kind of thing. And I think the same standards for naming the buildings should also apply to renaming the streets. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's similar in nature. So I would hope that you could, whatever we approve for the naming of buildings and facilities, to just carry over.
For renaming streets.
Or make it all into one, or however you want to word it. But that makes a lot of sense to me, so.
Yeah, for I guess the way my thinking was
I know
working.
you didn't have this policy in front of you before, so
Yeah.
it's kind of broken down now.
The way I guess I was thinking through this is the renaming of a street is very impactful for the people on that street. Where if we were naming or renaming a park, it's more of a community-wide.
Oh, I agree, but
And
the
so,
same process can apply, correct?
yeah,
We still don't want it. I could say if it's a donation, then it should be, if you want to put your family name on it and you're not designating it to a person, that's fine. It could be for donations, it could be a family name or a surname or whatever, not a person that's a living and, just wants publicity.
I think the element for the renaming of a street that's important is noticing the people on the street. Whereas if we were...
But some streets, if it's completely owned by the same family, they name it after their last name, right?
Right, but we would still want to give notice to all. That's the only thing that I think is different.
I think there should be
notice.
What you talk about with buildings, if I want to dedicate a building and call it, if John wants to dedicate because, his business wants the Ditmore building and pay $10 million and he wants to call that, but it shouldn't be called the John Ditmore building. It could be called the Ditmore building or something along those lines.
We take cash, check, or Venmo.
The only thing I wanted to add about the renaming, part of that advertising is just consistent with the way that street names come about originally. And it's, as the city manager mentioned, through subdivision, or as you all have seen for apartment complexes, we bring a resolution. So it's, again, just keeping it all in the public light. And that way, when we do, go to 911, we can say, okay, city council, considered this, and this was, the vote on such and such date, and we did advertise this.
But even for contractors and developers, they can choose a name, and if it's available, it could be approved, correct?
It could be approved.
Right.
But what you all haven't.
Random.
No, it's not random. What you all haven't seen in the background is some of, the city manager alluded to. Let's say somebody just wanted to add a T or a Y to an existing street, then, at the staff level, we'd be like, no, that's not going to fly. We've had a lot of people who want to do fruits and whatnot, and we're like, no, you can't do fruits because that's not going to fly.
Black and white, where the policy gives you that authority to just say no. I mean, it shouldn't have to come to council to say that.
And that's fine. I think that's fine.
Ms. Young?
Thank you, Mayor. So we have been here before with naming streets and renaming streets. And so Ellie B. Majid Drive, he's not deceased. Thelma Lane, I don't believe Thelma was deceased when we called off over there in Hollywood Estates, Thelma Lane. She could have been. I know she's one of their very oldest residents, and I think that's why they asked to have it named that, and we did that. We didn't have a problem with it. The other two things that we've changed the name to, and staff did a great job at making sure that no one actually lived on that street, so no address was on that street, so it didn't involve 911 services, it didn't involve the post office. But when we changed Donna Lane to Fairchild Lane, that came back to bite us. Very hard, and we did another one. It happened twice. So when we do this, we have to think about this very, very carefully. And in the future, going down the road for West Melbourne, some donor may just want to donate money and name a wing of maybe the new City Hall, another wing on it, and it should be the Stevenson building or whatever. They may want to do that, and they should be able to do that. In fact, when we were thinking of what we were going to name the park down there, the West Melbourne Community Park, we even thought about giving naming rights to anyone who wanted to contribute or to do something else, and we finally wound up calling it what we did. So I think we should be really, really careful about what we do and what we allow and what we don't allow. When we renamed this very chambers we're sitting in after the judge, we didn't even think of that until till the painting showed up, and then we did that. So please consider carefully.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Two quick questions, Mr. Rohde, on 12A5 under E. So City Council has approval if it comes, final approval if an item is valued at that over 5,000 mark. So under 5,000 is just going to go for city manager administrative approval?
And again, think about what 5,000, well, think about what 5,000 gets these days. I mean, it's park benches, it's trees, it's maybe a picnic table at one of the parks. It's meant to be very, it's not going to change the character of a park if a tree is named Bill Smith, Bill Smith's tree. So I think trying to keep that administrative, my request is to keep that administrative so that we can move forward, because almost all of them in my career have been a family member who passed. So-and-so always loved the park, and we'd really like to name a tree. We'd really like a dedicated tree in the park for them. And that's, we just try to keep that process moving along as easy as possible, as opposed to coming to a council meeting and having a vote on it.
Understood. I just wanted to make sure I understood that piece in particular.
Yep, under 5,000.
We currently don't have a set, here's a form you fill out for requesting something like a tree in memory of someone or something like that. Is that something that we are developing?
We have started that process because we did get a request for a tree. And so, kind of formalizing the process that we've used in the past, which is just to capture we don't think it's something the city should make money on because it's a nice donation, but we also don't think it's something that the taxpayer should fund, right? So we just want to capture the cost, not our time, not any additional cost. We just want to, if the tree costs $2,500 and the plaque costs $25, we just pass that cost along.
Understood. And then that'll be on the website, I'm assuming, for accessibility? Okay.
We'll add that.
The next question is regards to the one right underneath it with F. And just because as you were going through it, trees and benches make sense to me. Have we ever had someone request a shade structure in memory or as a memorial?
Yeah, it would be.
Is that an option?
It would be tough to pull off for 5,000, but again, because we're getting an umbrella, you get one umbrella. Because our parks are now developed to the point where we're starting to think about amenities as opposed to, playground equipment and the facilities, as we have been in the past, and we're kind of transitioning now that we have those things. We're thinking about amenities for the park, and so shade structures was just something that came out. We haven't been contacted by anybody, but that's an item, that could be pulled off, for $25,000, $35,000, which would would be a donation.
Well, we also may not have been contacted because people don't know it's an option. I did not know it was an option until seeing it, pop up in here as we could do this as a community. Not saying that, the council's talked about shade structures, but I think it's unique to offer it up as an opportunity.
Yeah, we've been approached for some odd things, but none of them have ever come to the fruition or to the point where we've needed to get approval.
Understood. Thank you.
Councilmember Volz.
Yes. First of all, Steve, that you wanted to delete that shall be considered. What did you want to put in there instead?
I just wanted to stop there.
Just stop.
Other factors considering the naming of the city facilities following the following factors.
Okay.
A through a G.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I don't know. I just have a problem with on the page A3, 12A3, at the bottom D, when it says financial contributions. How often do we have people like just donate money to, I mean, I'm thinking, I don't care if they donate money because they want the name changed or the name added, whatever, but to give, like somebody was mentioning earlier, John Ditmore, the Ditmore Building, and he gives $10 million, that's not something that I think that we should even address. I don't know.
I wasn't referring to it like as a council member.
No,
For stadiums, all
no.
naming rights. I mean, it's a.
I know that, but I'm just saying, I just had a hard time thinking that somebody could just donate a ton of money and the city would just bow down and, oh, we got a building named after you now, and then they can hold it over our heads. Well, I gave you this money, and
that's something, I think that's something that every council has to, give thought to, because it's really situational based. Well, my last community, the sports complex is named after
big banks and whatever, yeah.
A husband and wife that decided that they think kids are on their phones too much. And so if we're thinking about building a sports complex, they wrote us a check for $500,000. So it does happen, but I think it's situational, and that situation would come to the council.
Don't forget dog parks. Don't forget the Pilot dog parks.
So
You do have time restriction in there too, right? Where you can set a time on how long it's that way.
And I think a time and a use. A good example of the time and use is, this is our current council chambers. We will have a new council chambers. And so how long does that name carry over if somebody donates? But usually you want to put a time to that because, again, we are here for the long haul. 50 years goes by quicker than people think.
Yeah.
And improvements need to be made 50 years later. And if you're going to try to do naming rights for a big improvement of a park, you might need that flexibility to be able to name it something new. So but again, those bigger items will be very situational, and they'll come in front of this body, and this body will have to gauge that based on the situation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Frampus.
For E&F, Mr. Manager, do you want to limit yourself to just memorials? I mean, if somebody wants to donate a bench and put a placard on there because of their father, I mean, don't we want the bench?
Yeah,
I'm just curious. I mean, the current sign we have at the Field of Dreams has everybody that donated money, their name on it. So if somebody wants to donate a bunch and they want to put their name on the bench, I don't really have a problem with it. I want the bench.
Yeah.
So do you want to limit yourself to memorials is my question.
I guess maybe to tweak that language, what we didn't want is somebody to donate a bench, and I'll just pick on Pepsi. What we didn't want is somebody to donate a bench that's a Pepsi bench. I guess when and we can clarify that, when I talk about a memorial,
I just didn't want to, I wanted to know if you would not limit yourself to a memorial.
yeah, if they want to put Pepsi on the placard that we screw to the bench, I think we are wide open to that.
As long as it's a standardized
Right, that's what we want.
for the park, and they can put whatever they want on the placard, I don't care.
Right,
As long as it's not offensive, blah, blah, blah.
right,
so.
that was our intent with that, is we don't want the bench to be a walking advertisement. If Coke wants to put a little sign on there.
Like, I don't want a big picture like they have these benches for the bus stops where there's a billboard on it. I don't necessarily want that for the park.
Right, so we can amend that. That's very easy.
All right, so here it says that you're looking for a discussion, so are we going to vote on something? Do you want to make this into an ordinance?
Well, what we'd like to do, we wanted to have this discussion to get consensus, and then we will draft an ordinance to come back to the city council.
It's going to come back to us, so you got all you need.
Yeah, we wanted to have this discussion and try to iron out some of these details as opposed to doing it in an ordinance.
You got all you need from us. All right. So then we'll move on to city council reports. And Mr. Frampus. No report. Mr. McDowell. Deputy Mayor Adams. Not going to happen, right? Let me put an X there instead of a check mark.
Couple things to note. The Kennedy Space Center held their community update about a week and a half ago, and what was particularly interesting was they went through the past few years of what they've been working on at the Cape, but then also what the next 5 to 10 years of projects for the different departments look like. And they related it to multiple cities within Brevard County, what this looks like in terms of impacting us from an economic standpoint, from an employment standpoint, things like that. So I thought it was really informational. They hadn't held one in person since 2020. With the COVID stuff, they held that one online, and then prior, they just haven't done it. So they're going to be doing more of them in the future, so just a heads up on that. The West Melbourne Memorial Day celebration, very well done from staff in terms of putting it together and reaching out to residents. I did stop by there. The Promise Cafe, Abe's Place, and now what they're reopening as Treasures Boutique, that had an amazing turnout. Our community really showed up to support them. The Promise residents were there, many of them that are going to be working at the boutique and the cafe area, but sharing it also for our residents who may not know that they're continuing to look for donations for the boutique. And they've now started their lunch program, so it's for people or businesses that want any large number of lunch boxes, basically lunch orders to go. They're happy to deliver them, and they're doing that, as a way to reach out to the community. So that was just a big piece that they were pushing as part of their ribbon cutting. So I thought that was very well done. And then just a quick note about the West Melbourne Library for our residents. June 1st, they opened their summer reading program. So they have a program for kids under 10. They have a separate program for our teens ages 11 to 17. And then they do have an adult program, so you all can sign up. It's great. We can collect ducks for reading. It's great. But it's a way to engage with the community. The West Melbourne Library is doing it so people can sign up there, but each library is doing a slightly different program this year. So just something I wanted to share with council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Volz.
Yes, that Abe's Place was absolutely, it was incredible. The people that were there, the residents that were there, and it was just a phenomenal evening. It was really good. I was very impressed. But I just have one thing, and that is that the flag that is flying over the police department, it looks pretty bad. It looks like it needs to be replaced. It's very worn color-wise, so it probably should be replaced.
We'll take a look at all of our city flags, make sure they're up to snuff.
I think I did, but I just picked that one up because I was there yesterday. Thanks.
Councilmember Young.
I don't have a long report. I just wanted to comment that I'm glad to see that the Bed Bath & Beyond building is not going to remain empty, that Planet Fitness is going to be opening up there, and their target date is July 8th. That's it. See, I'm good. Short.
Good. Councilmember Detmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the VFW Memorial Day proceedings over at the VFW at 4206 on Dairy Road. Was there for that. Just the only thing I want to mention is my Memorial Day weekend didn't go as well as I wanted it to, but I will say that I want to thank the West Melbourne Police Department, the police chief, his staff for helping us solve Signgate, which was taken care of. So, again, for their help and their continued probing into this to get to the bottom of what was taking place. So I really appreciate that. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I just have one item to comment on is next week we do have the Space Coast League of Cities dinner that we as West Melbourne and Melbourne Village are sponsoring. So and make sure everybody knows about that and that we're all invited to that. And got any questions to the city manager on that? Mr. City Manager, did you have any closing comments?
I do not, sir. Thank you.
We're adjourned.